Thanks for listening to the Granite List.Live. Today's episode is brought to you by Connect Healthcare Collaboration, where benefits marketing meets clinical advocacy to drive effective employee engagement. This is the Granite List.Live, where we explore all things employee benefits and human capital related. I'm your host, Sally Pace. And today I'm joined by Grace Erickson, who is the VP of Revenue with Cocoon. And we're going to be talking about how paid leave boosts an employer's bottom line. I think a lot of people think that paid leave is simply a benefit, but it's not. It's really a strategic investment in your most valuable asset, which is your people. And so we're going to talk about why comprehensive leave policies are the secret weapon of forward-thinking companies. Grace, I know you come to this conversation with a very deep bench of experience. First of all, you were one of Cocoon's earliest employees, and you've had an impressive career beyond that or before that, working with companies like Asana, Carta, Clio. So really excited to have you on today's show.
Yeah, thanks so much. Super excited to be here. As you mentioned, I've been with Cocoon for some time now, one of our earliest employees, and I'm currently our VP of Revenue. And really, Cocoon exists to ease the burden and the process of leave management for both employers and the employees that they're supporting. We're doing that with technology that's aiming to automate the most complex parts of leave like compliance, claims, and payroll, all while creating a really easy to use and ultimately delightful experience for everyone who is involved in that leave process.
Love that.
You mentioned I came to Cocoon with, sort of varied experience across the board, and I absolutely did. But the main reason I came to Cocoon 4+ years ago now is because of my own experience with leave and my own passion for supporting people through leave experiences and the importance of that. And so super excited about this conversation today, Sally.
I want to jump in and start with a term that is being used that I'd love for you to really define for the audience: comprehensive paid leave.
Yeah.
What does that mean in today's workplace?
Absolutely. Comprehensive paid leave, we're graduating from the baseline of compliance, which in the US looks like complying with FMLA, state leave laws, in some cases local leave laws. That is the baseline for any employer that falls sort of under the jurisdiction of those various laws. When we're talking about a comprehensive paid leave policy, though, we're starting with two core tenets on top of that. One is that any program should be covering a wide range of employee needs. And the second is that you need to make sure employees actually understand what's available to them and are able to access these benefits that you're providing, or these policies that you're providing, I should say. So the first piece of a wide range of employee needs, I think often in conversations around leave, we're centering parental leave in how we're talking about it. We're talking about supporting parents at work. I think especially since 2020, this has been a major conversation, as it should be. And I noticed that people tend to really center on parental leave because it's easy and happy to talk about for the most part. And what happens is that really critical types of leave, like medical leave, like caregiver leave, others as well, are a bit more neglected or maybe not built out as much as part of company policies. And you end up leaving employees sort of hanging at these critical life moments that just aren't only when they're welcoming a new child. So I think the first piece is recognizing that leave applies to all sorts of points in your employee's sort of life journey. And when we look at, these three really big buckets of parental leave, medical leave, and caregiver leave, you can start to sort of realize that in any given employee's lifespan, their working lifespan, they are more than likely to have a reason for leave, right? Even if someone chooses to never pursue parenthood, people have surgeries, people have loved ones who need medical treatment, ongoing care, right? This is just part of life. And so thinking about covering these needs is just thinking about how do you provide support at these different points in your employee's life. So going beyond parental leave. And then the other side of it really is this piece around awareness, which we talk a lot about at Cocoon, right? This applies both to those federal and state laws I was mentioning as sort of the baseline of the compliance part of leave, but this also applies to your company policies. Something I always like to say is you could write the best leave policy in the world, right? Whatever that means for your company, you could have a perfect leave policy that is, everything you've ever dreamed of and more. But if your employees don't know what it is, know how to access it, inherently understand how it applies to them, and importantly, feel like they can use it, then that policy isn't really doing what you want. Sure, it might attract some talent, something we'll probably talk about a bit more, right? You might attract talent with that beautifully generous written policy you have, but it's not going to affect all those other pieces of your business if people can't actually take it, whether it's because they don't know it exists or they don't feel comfortable, right? So it's about how do we make our employees aware of these policies? How do we develop a company culture where people that need to take leave for all these different life reasons feel comfortable and supported in doing so?
And you've hit two of the life reasons that resonate really close to me. Thankfully, knock on wood, medical has not been one of them, but as a parent and a daughter whose parents, sorry, mom and dad, are not spring chickens anymore, it is very much a reality for today's workforce. You led with compliance, which sometimes lands on the ears of folks as just a checkbox that we have to go through. So how does Cocoon work with employers and help make paid leave more of a strategic business advantage as opposed to just that tick in the boxes?
Yeah, I think that when we're looking at the needs of employees today and what is going to help reduce risk in your employee population, what's going to help build loyalty in your employee population, also recruit talent on the front end, we really need to be thinking about this zoomed out view of supporting employees' sort of whole life journey. Leave experiences, we know this from lots and lots of data from lots of different companies, but also, right, I think anyone that has taken a leave or knows someone that's taken a leave even will kind of inherently feel this, is that leave experiences tend to be inflection points for people on a personal level, right? Whether it's because they're welcoming a child, right? That's a very big, impactful inflection point in a person's life, not just their career, but it's a life-changing sort of a thing, of course. But caring for an aging parent is also sort of an inflection point in a person's life. Having a major medical event that you have to care for yourself is a major inflection point. We know that these inflection points are major attrition risks for employers. All sorts of reasons we can point to around that, around specific leave reasons. But the bottom line is people taking leave or having these major reasons for taking leave, even if they don't take leave, leads to risk around them ultimately leaving the company. And so for employers, this is sort of a make or break moment where they can build trust, build loyalty with the employee, and retain them for much longer because they've demonstrated that they're invested in not only the work of that employee, but their life and supporting them through this inflection moment. Or it's a moment to seriously lose trust. And so when we think about the paid component of leave, this is shown to significantly increase retention of employees taking leave. Right. The compliance side of things, many employees have access to unpaid leave, right? Whether you have a policy or not, whether you are paying employees on leave or not, FMLA means that many of your employees have access to unpaid leave. Mm-hmm. Statistically speaking, employees that are taken unpaid leave are far less likely to return to work from that leave than employees with access to pay during their leave, even if that pay is for a relatively short period of time, right? I think we're often talking about the benefits of a 24-week paid parental leave policy that, a company like Google has. But we see these benefits existing even in a 2-week paid leave policy, if that is what is possible for your company. Like even doing that on top of, unpaid time available to employees makes a difference here. And then the last piece I'll add here is that we talk a lot about the leave takers when it comes to paid leave policies, right? That this is helping bring them back to work. It's showing we support them, etc. But having these policies sort of written out, well known by your employee population, signals to everyone at the company, not just people imminently planning a leave, that you are supportive of them and their needs and their life, right? And we see that this builds, again, trust and loyalty, even among employees who might never use that leave policy at your company. And so it really has this compounding effect when you can see it really in action and benefiting across the entire company.
Okay, so now that we've just talked about the feel-good side of it, the retention side of it, the trust, I'm going to be a little bit of a realist now, put on my CFO hat.
Yeah, we'll go from warm and fuzzy to the hard numbers.
Exactly. So let's talk about that. What are the true economic consequences for companies that aren't investing in these leave programs in a robust way?
Yeah. So I think the first place to start here is to debunk sort of like a commonly held assumption in the leave space, right? Really commonly when we're talking about paid leave policies, employers envision this as, oh my God, I'm paying my employee their whole salary or, their whole wages and they're not working. And I can't afford to be giving out, 3 months of salary and not getting that work done. I think valid concern. That's a high cost, especially to a small business or a growing business, right? This is potentially a very impactful cost for a business to incur. But when you're administering a comprehensive leave program effectively, for the most part, employers aren't paying that out completely out of pocket, right? You're recouping benefits from short-term disability, or employees are, I should say.
Okay.
Employees are recouping benefits from state programs, which means that offering comprehensive paid leave policies does not look like, for employers, paying everyone out of pocket while they're on leave. So functionally, most employers offering a paid leave salary are functionally paying a portion of that employee's salary to make them whole on top of state or short-term disability benefits. And so the dollars out on a leave program are often much, much less than people are initially assuming. So I think that's the first piece before we even talk about like the consequences of not doing it, is like the cost of doing it is often less than you might think. And when you can integrate these benefits, sort of have support doing those calculations, it makes it that much easier and makes the dollars and cents of your leave program start to make a lot more sense. So then the next piece we're talking about, okay, the consequences of all of this not going well. First piece is that when pay isn't coordinated, when leave experiences go wrong, attrition spikes significantly, and we have to incur the costs of replacing those employees, taking the time to hire backfills or what have you, addressing team morale related to attrition. And it's a major operational cost for the business, right? To backfill star performers who happen to have needed to take a leave. So that's the first point. The next point is, without a comprehensive program in place, clear written policies, a plan for administering those policies, not only are HR, payroll, and legal taking on the operational tasks associated with those things, when it's not comprehensive and clear, they're also firefighting left and right to manage leave questions on the most challenging and claims of things like leave discrimination, or digging through basically doing audits of payroll, right? The time that is spent by HR, payroll, and legal when leave programs aren't thoughtful and integrated, applied consistently across an employee population cannot be overstated. When we first started Cocoon, as you can imagine, we spoke to hundreds of HR professionals, and we heard over and over and over again that leave was one of the most challenging, most burdensome aspects of their job that was taking up way more time than it ought to. And then on top of that, as we've dug deeper, we found that within leave, the pay component of getting it right around leave pay is such a daunting task with so much room for error that it is like sucking the life and time out of these pay and HR teams. And so when you think about what might my HR team be capable of, what might they pursue instead if they weren't manually calculating, someone's dollars and cents on pay or on leave, I should say, right? What could they be doing instead? And so there's also an opportunity cost factor here. When you have certain employees bogged down in the minutia of leave that they don't have to be, they can do really incredible, much more strategic work for your company.
Absolutely. We've hit on feelings. We've hit on finance. Now we've got some interest from companies that are actually wanting to improve their leave programs. So Grace, can you kind of walk us through what a couple of first meaningful steps would be?
The thing I always want to tell people, if you're a company that doesn't have anything in place in terms of a leave program besides, that minimum requirement around compliance, is that something is better than nothing. And so the answer of what to do first is to just start. And for a lot of companies, right, for a lot of HR people or like the broker team supporting them, that might mean looking at this particular company and identifying the path of least resistance to just start, right? Getting leave programs in place requires buy-in from a lot of people a lot of the time. And you could be an incredibly well-meaning HR leader wanting to implement, top tier policies that you're seeing modeled by companies in the news, right, who are touting their policies. But if you have large hurdles with your finance team, with your executive team, with the financial realities of your company, it's okay to take incremental baby steps in the direction where you want to go, right? And so you don't want to let perfect, this, pie in the sky idea you might have, be the enemy of good and end up in this sort of holding pattern where you still don't have something. So the first thing is to write something down as a beginning point that your employees can reference. Have something in your handbook that is a consistent policy that people can follow. When you do have something in place, like go right now and audit those policies. It doesn't have to be some massive analysis, but look at them and say, does this cover a range of employee needs that might be addressed by leave? Or have we only written a parental leave policy and we need to think about medical, caregiver, military leaves, things like that? And as you're thinking about that, think about the equity among your employees, right? How do we think about paid leave policies that are treating employees equitably, regardless of what their need for leave might be? So a place I like to start here for framing for people is think about the relationship between bonding leave for parents and caregiver leave, right? These are both types of caregiving, right? So if you're looking at your policies through the lens of equity, how do we equally value different types of caregiving? Or similarly, right, pregnancy disability is technically speaking a medical leave. And so how do we think about the relationship between pregnancy disability leave and a medical disability leave, and how we start to build these policies that are more agnostic to the reason for leave, right? The specific reason, right? We're not saying that this is more important than that. We're looking at these broad categories of needs for leave. And then the last piece I'll add is you start to mature in developing leave policies is starting to really shift your mindset from leave as a set of policies that are documented in my employee handbook to really as leave as a program that supports the needs of employees and the company, right? When we start to think about an integrated program, now we're taking this lens of, okay, what are the policies? What are the compliance requirements? How am I integrating pay? How does this connect with my STD program? And you start to have a much more holistic support system that can now function really effectively and touching all these different parts of leave, because leave is not a static thing. It touches so many pieces of the business that when we think of it as a program is when we really start to see it running really effectively and hitting all of those goals that we want to achieve with a comprehensive paid leave program.
And I want to, as we wrap up this episode, I want to kind of circle back to what we opened with, and that is technology and modernization. But it's kind of on the heels of a conversation I had recently with a head of HR, 1,000 employees, primarily hourly wage earning, and she's keeping up with leave on an Excel spreadsheet. Mind-blowing and exhausting. But that is the exact opposite of what Cocoon brings to the table. So can we end with a little bit of a discussion around how modern tools can transform leave management from what I feel was a very administrative burden to an employee experience differentiator?
With the tools that are now available in the market for leave management, including Cocoon, technology is really changing what it looks like for an HR person to manage leave. The status quo for years and years and years has been exactly what you're describing, which is managing leave in a spreadsheet. Let me tell you, some of the spreadsheets I've seen are like, hats off to those people. It is truly some impressive Excel work. So I can't knock some of the work these people are doing, but it just blows your mind that work that is inherently high risk, both from a compliance and finance standpoint, but also from an employee health standpoint, is being managed with this room for error. Mm-hmm. And so with tools like Cocoon, we're able to automatically determine employee eligibility, right? When we're talking about all those laws, for the standard HR professional not using a software to manage leave, they're very likely looking up on Google the state leave laws, or turning to their broker, who is in turn looking up on Google the state leave laws for, I've never had an employee go out in Colorado. I don't know what to do there. I've only managed California leaves, and now I have someone in Colorado going out on leave. So with technology, we're able to automate compliance and eligibility determinations so that massive room for error and room for risk is completely off the plate of the employer managing leave. We're also able to do things like automating compliance notices going out to employees. Typically, employers are required to send notices out within a certain time frame. And this is the sort of thing that if you had a busy day and you forgot to send an email, all of a sudden you can end up out of compliance. And that's the sort of thing that it doesn't take human expertise to send this email, right? That is not a special skill that you have to have, right? This is something that is perfectly suited to technology. And that's really how we think of it at Cocoon, is when we look at all of the decision points in the leave process, all of the variables in the leave process, we say which of these things are objective decisions that can be best made by software and technology, and how do we make those as smooth and automated as possible? And then which of these things are subjective decisions that really we want to put the right tools in the hands of the employee, of the HR team, to make the most informed decisions they can around those subjective choices. And what happens is you have technology doing what technology is best at, and you have humans doing what humans are best at, which is supporting their people through leave, navigating the challenges and the joys of the reasons that a person is taking leave versus getting bogged down in the spreadsheets, in the payroll calculations, in Googling the new leave laws that have just come out and everything. So really, Cocoon, whether or not people use Cocoon, we'd love for you to use Cocoon. We think it's great. But whether or not you use Cocoon, we want to use technology to help make HR people's lives managing leave easier. And so we have tons of resources available for free for anyone to use to start their leave program, manage their leave program, and hopefully make their day-to-day a bit easier. The spreadsheet's a little bit less stressful until they're ready for a larger tool implementation like something like Cocoon.
Well, we think at the Granite List, Cocoon is great also. I know I'm not supposed to have favorites, but I will say that your page on the Granite List is one of my most favorites because it is chock full of valuable information. So big takeaway here, audience. Please go look at the Cocoon page on the Granite List, and you will see in real life all these wonderful things or be directed to these wonderful things that Grace just alluded to. So with that, I want to thank you, Grace, for being here. Thank you, Cocoon, for your partnership with us at the Granite List. And thank you, audience, for tuning into another episode of the Granite List Live.
Thank you so much, Sally. Good to talk to you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Granite List Live. Access our entire library by visiting your favorite podcast venue or subscribe on our site, thegranitelist.live.